Hello, everyone. That beautiful piece of music, of course, is Key to the Cellar. And we are posting the credits. It's a traditional tune. The dance is composed by Jenny Beer. The band who played it tonight was Bare Necessities. The musicians are Kate Barnes, Earl Gaddis, Mary Lee, Jacqueline Schwab. The CD is New Shoots, New American Dances, and it's available from the CDSS bookstore. So those are wonderful pieces of music. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Hello, we're happy you're with us tonight. I am Darlene Hamilton, and we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society. On our team, we have Lindsay Verbal assisting with the program, handling media for our guests and helping me in so many different ways. And in the background on Zoom is Reed Wilson. He is capturing all your questions and doing the posts on Zoom. And on Facebook Live, we have Larry Hansen, and he is doing the same, capturing all those wonderful questions and posting all the things you need to know about tonight's talk. So including these credits for the music that just played. Thank you for being with us today. Well, it's the more I do these, the more wonderful I know how many people in our community are. We have a wonderful community. They love answering your questions. So if you have them for our guests, please post them in the chat boxes. Look for them on both platforms. You're going to want to know where they are because there's usually a lot of lively debate and other things going on. So they're a lot of fun. And we will get to as many as possible either during this web chat or in the after talk. So stick around. If you signed up for our Zoom registration, then you already have the link to the after talk. But otherwise, you're going to have to wait until the end when we post it in the chat section. So many important things to talk about in chat. Thank you to Karen Axelrod for her concert every Tuesday. Live on Facebook, and to all her friends, her musician friends that submit things, and it just makes Tuesday night so special. So I feel very blessed that we have that every Tuesday. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to jump into a bio about our guest tonight. Dr. Heather Clarke is a dancer, a scholar, an author, a teacher, and a dance organizer from Australia. Having danced from a young age, she has performed on stage and screen and now concentrates on research and promoting traditional dance in Australia. As a dance historian, she studies early Australian colonial culture and step dance. In 2018, her work on Australian convict dance, which we will hear a little bit more about tonight, earned her a PhD. A longtime teacher of English country dance, Clarke authored Captain Cook's Country Dances. Earlier this year, a collection of country dances associated with Cook and with life in colonial Australia, complete with historical notes on each one and tunes arranged by her son, Roland Clarke. Heather has traveled the world pursuing her interest in English country dance, including attending dance camps, festivals, and workshops throughout the British Isles, the United States, and Australia. She is on the board of many dance organizations, including the InStep Research Team, the Australian Social Dance Network, and Bush Traditions. Please welcome Dr. Heather Clarke. We're so happy to have her with us tonight.
Hi. Hello. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. And what time of day is it there?
It's midday, just after midday.
We're so glad it works out with our show.
Yes, it's very easy for me.
Yeah. So were you going to say a preamble to the talk, or do we want to just jump right into the things?
No, let's just jump right in.
Okay, great. So the thing number one is, make sure I can hold it up on the screen perfectly. The fabulous fascination with history, philosophy, and dance.
I'm really fascinated by the interconnections between dance and history and also philosophy. Since dance is considered as a reflection of society, And we can tell so many things from what people were dancing at a certain time. And I'd just like to start with that first slide. It's a quote about dance and philosophy. So it says that dance, especially when combined with music and poetry, was seen as a reflection of the harmony of the universe. It has even been the basis of moral behavior, helping to attune the soul to God. Since choreographies embodied the same harmony as ordered the universe, they too had the power to order or harmonize the souls of those who watched. It was hoped that the combination of music, dance, and poetry not only exercised its harmonic powers on the bodies and souls of those watching a dance spectacle, but also on the political state or entity to restore it to peace and harmony. So this quote comes from a book by Jennifer Neville. She was one of the editors and writers. And I just think it's fascinating the way that the first university that was set up in 300 BC, that music and dance were considered an integral part of being educated. And it was only through having this education that you could be a properly rounded individual. Unfortunately, that hasn't continued. Nobody now considers music and dance as integral to a good education. But wouldn't the world be different if they did? So that whole idea of how philosophy can affect the way people dance is, I find, very interesting. When you think of the French Revolution, that it was a great time for dancing, that was the major pastime in the revolution. And people used it to escape the misery and the drudgery and the terror. It was a real escape. Likewise, if we look at the Industrial Revolution, when the individual started to become more important, people started turning away from dancing in groups. So that's when the couples dances started to develop. So the English country dance is based on that earlier premise of a stronger community, I think, that people were looking out for each other more. So that's an interesting step into the Victorian era and industrialization and all those things, they affected the way people danced. And I think you can trace that through many stages of history. But English country dancing itself is very special because it captures very accurately what was happening in society in quite a different way. So we have dances that were devised to go with plays. So you have a dance like Touchstone, which came from, why did I choose that? I can't think of what the play that came from. But if you look at The Recruiting Officer, that's a better example. There's a dance that you probably have danced that came from that play. And that was the first play ever produced in Australia. And it was produced within 18 months of them settling here by convicts. So that connection is really quite fascinating. And also current events. English country dance always celebrated things that were happening in society. So in Australia, or when we're talking about Australia, the theatre used to be used like a newsreel. So people would go along to find out what was happening. And before the convicts even arrived in Australia, they had in the Royal Circus in London a representation of them landing. So they must have had absolutely no idea what it would look like, but they put it on the stage and invented something. And there's actually a tune, and a dance called Botany Bay that was published in 1788. So that's another connection. And songs too are also, many of the dance tunes that we know have accompanying songs. And the reason I chose Key to the Cellar as a good example, well, there's the modern dance now, which is just delightful. Jenny Beer's wonderful new choreography. Well, that tune was a Jacobite tune and a satirical song about the king and how he was rather immoral, and lots of sort of dance metaphors in that song too. And then I discovered in my convict research that one of the convicts who was a flageolet player, he was brought up before the court for being, you know, a bit of a nuisance. And he said he played in the hop shops. So that's the dance halls. And he listed 4 tunes that he played. And one of them he called Bobbing Joe, which we think of as a play for dance. But when we looked at the timing, so this was about 1820, we found it published in a collection in the National Library of Ireland. And we thought that tune sounds a bit familiar. And sure enough, when we got used to it, it was Keys to the Cellar, but it was a dotted rhythm. So they played it very differently. But I just love the way that connects through history. You get the Jacobite song, and then you get a convict in Australia playing that tune. And then Jenny Beer finds it and writes a fantastic new dance for it. So I just love those connections. I think they're quite fascinating. Yeah, so English country dancing, that's one of the qualities of it, that you get the old dancers and you get the new dancers. And they're connected often. The tunes can be reused, but there's lots of new tunes being written. And I love the way that you can have so much variety. You get the fast dancers and the jigs and hornpipes, and then at the other end you get the really stately, slow things and everything else in between. So that's why I think English country dance is particularly special. That connection I love. And then in the folk process, the way the dances have changed. So you've got Sharp's interpretation, where the dances are lovely and flowing. And then we've also got the Dolmetsch historical aspect, where you've got all the steps, and they're very punctuated by steps. I think that's really great that we have that variety. That's what's really special about English country dancing. So, thing 2.
And we are going to move on to thing 2. And I did post in the chat. We are so thrilled to have you with us today. And oops, I know you're struggling with a little bit of location sound. Don't worry about it. It's going just fine. Thing number 2, impetus to research why I had to find out more.
So I grew up in a family that was very interested in folk traditions. They didn't dance much, but they love folk music. So both my grandfathers played. One of them played a big red piano accordion, and he loved music hall songs, so he used to play those. And my other grandfather, who unfortunately I didn't meet, he was a Scottish fiddler, and he also played the bagpipes. So he left behind a very strong legacy in our family. Would you like to show the next slide? Because this is something that really influenced me when I was a child. The whole Scottish dance culture. So I was involved more in Highland dancing, and I was in a pipe band a young teenager. But my mother used to play this record a lot, and I just loved the image of people dancing together, and I loved the white dresses and the tartan and the kilts. So that had quite a big influence on me, I think. So I did join a pipe band, and I found that I was a very indifferent piper. I didn't remember the tunes well enough when I was marching, but I loved Highland dancing, so I was more involved in that. But my parents are also very interested in the folk tradition in Australia. So what we call bush traditions are the sort of bush meaning rural country, in the same way country dance with bush dance. So they're very interested in that, and we belong to a club called the Bush Music Club, which is formed in the 50s and is still going fairly strongly. But interest in these things is sort of declining a bit in Australia, so we're working on how to make them relevant again, I guess. So when I left school, I went on a cycling trip with my brother to England, and we were already involved in bush dancing and Irish dancing at that stage. So we went around and visited lots of places where they were dancing. Chippenham Folk Festival was probably the height of it, and the Killarney Folk Festival was really great. Lots of set dancing there, and we didn't do that in Australia then. But then it made me wonder more about the traditions in Australia. So then I came home, and shall we see the next slide? This is one of the things that we were involved in. We were in a television drama called A Boy in the Bush. That's my brother and me, of course. So that was a wonderful thing. We got to dance with the leading actors in the show. So they used to make quite a few of those sorts of dramas in those days, but they don't seem to be making so many. So there's not so many opportunities, but we did a few like that. There was one about Robert Louis Stevenson and yeah, a couple of others. So leading on from that, I met Kit, who is now my husband, 2 days after he emigrated from England, and at a dance, of course. So he had danced with London Folk, and I know you've already seen the video of London Folk, so you'll know the quality and the amazing performances they used to do. So he brought that with him, that experience, which has had a great effect on the way we dance. He was also involved in Scottish country dancing. So that fabulous music that I'd heard all my life up to then, I got to learn how to dance it, which was just a lovely thing. He was also involved in Morris dancing, and through the Morris dancing, I started doing some English clog dancing. So a lot of things in the mix, which is fairly common in Australia, to have that sort of mixture of Irish and Scottish and English forebears and Cornish and whatever else, Welsh. So from there, we did lots of dancing, and then we moved to Canberra and we decided to set up a performance group. So here's the next slide. This is our group called the Governor's Pleasure. And we specialised in the traditions of early colonial Australia. And then we did quite well, because the next photo will show you that we indulged in a dance competition and we won the John Drury Cup. So that was really an exciting thing to do, a competition like that, and to come out with a prize. That was really exciting. So then all tied up with this, I was looking at the the dance culture in Australia. And I met up with a lady called Shirley Andrews, and she published this book, Take Your Partners, which is about dancing in Australia. And then she also, there's one called 200 Years of Dancing in Australia that she wrote with Peter Ellis, who's also, they're both passed away now, but they were very active early researchers. So they concentrated very much on the dances that could still be collected. So they tended to gather things from about 1880, maybe a little bit earlier, through to the early Edwardian times. And Shirley believed that there wouldn't have been any dancing in the early colony because she thought the conditions were not right for it. So that made me wonder about that very much. And that's what sparked my interest in early dance in Australia, well, early dance, colonial dance, the earlier times. Then the next step in my own dance development, so to speak, is that when we moved to Canberra in 2003, I dabbled in ballet, but I took on ballet very seriously then. So I've done lots of exams, and I haven't done the competitions. I've done the exams. I used to compete with Irish and Highland dancing, but I haven't done that with ballet. And then the next step was the academic development. So, thing 3.
All right, thing 3. But first, I wanted to ask you, I was thinking with all your different training, do you do historical footwork in which you're about to talk about in the colonial dancing?
I do, yeah, I do. But I find that it's a bit too demanding for many people. I recently, I wrote a chapter for the book that's coming out about Kate Van Winkle-Keller's work. And within that, I was looking at the path that Cecil Sharp took as opposed to the historical dance side. So I found that really interesting that Sharp developed that style so it was easy for people to dance and it's beautiful and flowing. And I love that. But then I also love the other side, which is, far more balletic and the historical elements. Like I love that too. I love the fact that we've got both of them and that we can use them appropriately in whatever situation. And the fact that people are still working on understanding more about the steps and how they apply to play for dancing particularly. That we know now that people didn't just walk. Nobody ever just walked. It was all very much dance with steps. Not necessarily complicated steps, but they played a part too.
That's great. That's really interesting. Thank you. Our group does a little bit of footwork, not a lot, but a little. So I'm always a little interested, but yes, there's so much fabulous modern dance as well. So thank you for answering that. Let's move on to thing number 3. Convicts, hornpipes, and Captain Cook.
So this element of academic research comes into play now. So I contacted the dance faculty here at the Queensland University of Technology, and they invited me to come and give a talk and a workshop about what I did. So I came along and did that. It was a good afternoon. And then they suggested that perhaps I should like to do it in a more academic way. And I said I would love to do that, but I've never found a university where you could actually do that sort of thing. So they said, well, come to us and we can do it. We can do a professional doctorate, they call it. So it's important that you have a a very solid career as a dancer. Well, not just as a dancer, but as a researcher. You've got to show that you've got the background and that you're capable of being a leader and so on. And then you do a creative work. So you do the archival research, then you do a creative work, and then you write about that and what the outcomes were. So that was fantastic. It was such a wonderful place and so much support. And I met so many interesting people doing just fascinating things. One of my friends was developing psychological skills training for ballet dancers. And another person was working on bringing dance to elderly people with mobility problems. So quite a diverse range of activities that they were looking at. But my research focused on convict dance in early Australia. So I had previously looked a lot at the elite culture in Australia. So what people were dancing at the government balls and, you know, what they were dancing in grand ballrooms. But no one had looked at what was happening for lower order people, as they called them. So convicts came generally from the lower classes, to use that parlance. So I was aware, I'd come across a few times references to convicts dancing, and I thought, I wonder if there's enough information, but I'll give it a go and see what I can find. Well, the amount of information I found was just phenomenal. So I started looking in England and discovered that the Old Bailey criminal court records had a wealth of information. So it's not that dancing was an illegal activity, but often they would use it either as an alibi or they would capture someone as they were dancing. Certainly as an alibi, they would say, oh, I saw that fellow leading down the country dance at 3 o'clock in the morning, and those sorts of references. So quite a lot of those types of things. And they sometimes describe what they were dancing. So they were dancing a reel or a jig or a country dance. Then I began to look at the convict experience. So people danced in prisons in the early days. So we're looking at Australia was settled in 1788. And then I went through to about 1840, which was when they stopped most of the transportation to the east coast of Australia. So most of it stopped then. So after prisons, then I looked at the transports, and we found that a lot of the surgeons in charge of convicts kept medical records, and they were obliged to keep journals. And a number of them mentioned that every evening they would let the convicts on the deck to dance. And that's just not the image that we have, is it, of convicts? You think of them in chains all the time, but that just isn't true. Certainly there were instances where that was the case, but more often than not, they weren't chained below decks, that they did have time to dance on the decks, and they understood that it was good for their health. There's one surgeon who wrote about tranquility of mind and how the convicts were much easier to deal with, and there were fewer fights because they were allowed to dance. And then when we get to the colony here, again, dancing generally isn't illegal, but it is, you need to have a licensed place if you're going to have a large gathering. So those accounts are reported in police incidents. So occasionally you'll get, there's a lovely one about a masquerade ball where the police could hear terrible fiddling and drumming at 11 in the morning, and so that 11 in the night, I mean, in the evening. And so they went along and went to raid this place, and people in all variety of costumes started jumping out the windows so they wouldn't be arrested. But they did manage to capture a few of them, and so they put them away in the lock house. And then in the morning, there was a great crowd gathered to witness their costumes as they were released. So we get fabulous stories like that coming through. We often get stories about drinking and dancing, of course. So, and convicts weren't allowed out without permission, but you get instances where they were arrested because they'd been away from their masters for 3 days, and then they found them dancing a jig in the public house. So there's lots of references like that. It's just such an interesting way to look at dance. And often dances are mentioned, some tunes are mentioned by name. And I think that's quite significant because when we look at the more elite level, they tend to just write, you know, we had an evening of country dances or quadrilles. But with the convict records, you seem to get a bit more variety in the number of tunes that they mention. So one of the tunes they seem to love was Paddy Carey. They seem to have loved that one. That was one of the top tunes. And also, My Lodging is on the Cold Hard Ground, which we now know as the waltz. I can't think what it's called. What's the waltz called? The Endearing Young Charms. So isn't it interesting that convicts loved a waltz called? I often wonder, you know, sometimes it's the comic factor that you don't know whether they're really telling the truth or whether they're just making something up. Because one of the earliest references in the newspapers is from 1803, where they talk about them dancing the Cheshire Rounds, the Country Bumpkin, and the Irish Trot. Now, they are all dancers, but are they just writing that to sort of go, you know, these people are so old-fashioned, look what they're dancing? Or were they really dancing them? You know, there's a bit of a question there, because the Cheshire Rounds is like, it's a very old folk. It did become a folk dance. It's in Playford, of course. But the fact that they mentioned it, well, even if they weren't dancing it, people would have known what the dance was. So that becomes significant in itself. Anyway, moving on from convicts, the next thing I've been working on has been about Captain Cook and dancing both on board ship and through the Pacific, and also the dances associated with his life. Now, this was very much inspired by this book. I met Kitty Keller the first time I went to Pinewoods. That was in 1993. And I was in touch with her ever since. We wrote to each other and emailed each other, and she was just the most amazing mentor. And that book, she traces Washington's life through dance. So I was able to do a similar thing with Captain Cook and discovered, first of all, I discovered a dance called the Transit of Venus. So that was the impetus for Cook traveling to the Pacific, was to observe the transit of Venus. So the fact that they actually wrote a dance about it and a tune is, I think, is just, you know, extraordinary, really. And then I found a whole collection. So if you look at my website, there's a whole section on dancing with Cook there. So he lived next door to the Mile End Assembly Room. So there's a dance called that. We don't know whether he ever went there, but his wife and his children were reared there. I think it's quite likely that he would have been there at some stage. And then there's leading on from that, there were plays or pantomimes. The first one was a pantomime called Oh My, which was based on a young Tahitian man who travelled back to England with Cook. And he became the darling of society for a while. And then Cook took him back to Raiatea, actually. And he settled there, which didn't go all that well. But after Cook died, they invented this beautiful pantomime, and it has a wonderful tune in it, particularly. So that's on our CD if you want to get hold of that, the Oh My one. And then a few years after that, they developed a ballet called The Death of Captain Cook. Now, I don't think any country dancers came out of that, but there's certainly a lot of dance scenes in it. And they would show scenes with the sailors dancing and the native people dancing, as well as them dancing together. So that's not particularly well known, even though it was extremely popular for many years. It was developed into an equestrian drama. I have no idea what they look like. We have a few pictures of people, of men dressed up as sailors, standing on the back of horses who were dressed up as battleships, which is quite remarkable. But, you know, there were no horses in the Pacific. But they did it somehow. And that was taken to America with Ricketts Circus. So, and we know the dance called Captain Cook's Country Dance existed in America. It's in the Rush manuscript. So presumably they were dancing those two. I'm quite involved in the study of step dance too in Australia. So we had traditions of Irish dancing and clog dancing and so on. So we have a picture of Craig Revel Horwood. This was on a BBC television show called Who Do You Think You Are, where they trace people's genealogy. And Craig Revel Horwood is quite famous in England. He's actually an Australian, or was born an Australian. When they followed his family history, they discovered that his great-grandfather was a champion clog dancer in Australia. So they contacted me and we talked about clog dancing in Australia, and we found a tune, a step dance tune from the area where his forebear had lived. So we got together and they filmed it, and I was able to present him the medal of his great-great-grandfather, and I taught him a couple of clog dances. So if you visit the after talk, we can talk more about that. But one of the things that most interests me is the significance of dance, and dance for well-being and social connection and belonging and an antidote to despair and all those things, the reasons why people dance. I can recommend very highly this book about, it's Oxford Handbook of Dance and Wellbeing, came out quite recently. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I recommend that very highly. So the thing that came out through my convict research particularly is the way that people dance to escape their everyday life, really, that they can be taken to, you know, a different place where you don't think about those things, which is just as current now as it ever was. So that's, you know, when we study history, that's one of the things we look for. You know, how is it relevant today? We might, you know, we don't have to like or dislike history, but it's learning from it, really. So that's one of the features of my work. I think it's very important to write about these things and to do what we're doing now, really, and to approach it from different levels. So I think it's very good to write academically about English country dancing, but also as an entertaining way, just to make people aware that it exists. Because in Australia, when I talk to people about convicts dancing, they go, oh, they would be Irish. And I go, well, a third of them were Irish, but the rest of them were actually English. And English people danced. And people are so surprised by that because it seems to have just dropped out of our culture pretty well entirely. But I would like to say that what the Historical Tea and Dance Society is doing right now is a really wonderful, extraordinary, exceptional thing, because it's such a record of how we're dancing now. Imagine if we'd been able to do this with Playford. Where did you get all those dancers from? You know, it would tell us so much. And the fact that we're able to record these things and have them freely available is a really remarkable resource. So thank you, Darlene, and the team, Lindsay, everyone. I think it's really important what you're doing. And although, you know, we're all entertained and we think it's lovely, it's also highly significant, I think. So well done. Next thing.
Oh, well, thank you, Heather. Really appreciate that. Before we move on, I really wanted to ask you a question because, you know, a lot of times we have these wonderful people that have done so much work in what they do, and it's like, yay, a book. But there must have been quite the road to get to that book. So just how difficult is it to take on a project like this? Can you speak a little bit about what you went through to create this body? This is an impromptu question. I did not ask you about it before, but listening to you and realizing how much work must have gone into this, I was kind of curious.
Oh, well, it's years, you know, really a lot of research. And I'm so lucky that I've been able to do this and devote so much time to it through my life. You know, it's really been a full-time thing for a long time for me. But the actual act of getting a book published is, I haven't found it very easy. And I've wanted to do it, but I'm one of these people that I never have enough information. I always want to find more. I've never finished. So it was actually Kit who went, you know, we should do a book and a CD. And I went, okay, that'd be nice. And he has actually done a lot more of the work of putting it together. I've given him the information and he's, you know, we've discussed it, but he was really the driving force behind the book. So perhaps you could ask him. But yes, and how to market these things is a difficult issue too, I think. You know, how do you bring it to a wider audience? I don't know the answer to that. We were all set to come on tour through America and England this year. And also in Australia, you know, it was 250 years since Cook visited. So we thought it would be the perfect timing. But in fact, it hasn't been that perfect. But still, you can still buy our book and our CD. So next thing.
Okay, yes. Thing number 4.
How are we going to get through everything?
We are, don't worry, we will. A trip to, well, just about everywhere.
I wanted to talk how important the global dance community has been to me. In Australia, the community is quite small. So if you show this next slide, this shows a map of Australia imposed over the United States. And you can see each place that we've marked on there has an English country dance group. Some of them have more than one. Sydney has more than one. Other places, they have a bit more variety. But, you know, we're really spread out and the groups aren't particularly large. Of course, there's lots of Scottish country dancing in Australia. That's probably the biggest thing. But in terms of English country dancing, that's it. So we don't have any weeks like you have in America, but we do have a little video of our National Folk Festival. So would you like to see that? If you keep watching it, you'll see Brooke and Rogery, who came to visit last year. But this is a basic introduction. So that qualifies as a bush dance or a colonial dance. You can see that people aren't just walking. People tend to dance pretty much all the time. It's quite energetic. So that's one of the differences I notice when I go abroad, that people tend not to dance quite so energetically. Anyway, it's really important to us to be able to travel. So we tend to go to England to dance. We go to places like Eastbourne and Lichfield and those sorts of festival. And when we were there last time, we met Margaret Fennessy, who you might like to have on your program, because she's quite an important person. And then we come to America, and that's just wonderful, because you have these lovely dance weeks where you can dance all day and all night and just hardly sleep at all. I just love coming to those. Last year we went to Lennox, which was really special. So we've been to Pinewoods 7 times. There's a picture of me at Pinewoods. And another thing that we really appreciate is the fact that they have scholarships to attend these camps. So Pinewood, certainly Heydays, we've really benefited by having those scholarships. I've had the research scholarships at Pinewoods, which have been really good. Likewise in England, we've been to the Historical Dance Society there. One of the highlights of my life was going to the 2015 summer school, where we concentrated on the dancers, the Duchess of Richmond's ball. That was a celebration 200 years since then. And we danced quadrilles with ballet steps. So Stuart Marsden was the one who did that. And it was just fantastic. It was just, one of the best things ever. So the Historical Dance Society has also been good. I've published a paper about research in convict dance and, the ways to do that lower order type of research. And I also recently did a video about Captain Cook for them. Of course, we're supported locally too. I have the support of Bush Traditions. So they help us with running things, and we put music on their sites and so on. The local council here has been very good to me. They sponsor our local dancers, and oh yes, and I had a museum exhibition that the local council put on in one of their big museums when I finished my doctorate. So that was another highlight of my life, having an exhibition like that on dancing. Wow. We also had the great honor of having visiting teachers come. Now, Bruce has been twice, Bruce Hamilton, and what a wonderful, just a wonderful experience that's been to have him come and talk about, you know, different ways to teach. So that was at our Bundanoon weekend where we danced for a long weekend. So he came, he's been twice in 2016 and in 2017. And last year, Brooke Friendly came and Bogery came. So this is so important because, you know, it can get a little bit stagnant, is not quite the word I want, but, you know, we really need more input. And they both talked a lot about the way that dancing is taught and how to be a good dancer. And I know this has all been discussed at length before, but I think that it's such an important thing that we need to be addressing, how to make people welcome and not push people around and just dance, you know, as best as you can. And having them come has really helped a great deal. So that importance of collaborating with other people and other organizations, I think is very useful. Things like the Child Grove videos that Paul posts, like they're excellent resource too. For, you know, we need that input of new dancers to keep the tradition alive and active. So the other thing that's come out of those visits to Pine Woods and Eastbourne, actually, and Heydays is this collaboration to create the CD. So our two leading musicians, Roland and Isabel, went to California this year and got together with Jim Oakton and Shira Carmen and Charlie Hancock and produced this lovely CD that you'll hear at the end. And coming to that is the fact that my family is very supportive and they're interested and they all sing and dance and play music and it was wonderful to come to Heydays all together last year. We had the most amazing time, which leads me into thing 5.
But first, before we move on to thing 5, and by the way, your family was a big hit at Heydays. I love your family. I was going to ask about them a little bit later, or maybe in the after talk. But we have a question, and it relates a little bit to one that came up, thing that came up earlier. But we're going to put it on. Don't worry about the time. We never end right on time, but pretty close. So, Lindsay.
You bet. We had a question that came in on Ruth's survey. Ruth, would you like to go ahead and ask it now?
Sure. So I was wondering whether in your research on Australian dance history, you found questions that would be useful to ask about other dance histories and traditions. You know, is there something you could see as a model for other explorations in other places?
Oh, definitely, yes. And
in the way you have intersectionality of different kinds of dancing.
Yes, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of, like my research isn't just about Australia because you need to understand, you know, where the dancers are coming from. So as I was mentioning, like with the convict stuff, looking at how the lower order people were dancing in England and in Scotland and in Ireland and how that came with them. And certainly if you're looking at dance research, it's sort of opening the ways, you know, different places to look, because you wouldn't think to look in a medical record for information about dancing. You wouldn't think to look in a court record. But, and certainly at the elite level, like you wouldn't look in those sorts of places. there you'd look at dance cards and, reports in the newspaper and so on, or even in people's diaries. But it depends what level you're looking at. So certainly for lower orders, where they wouldn't have been advertising their dances, and generally there wouldn't be people writing diaries about them, that you just have to look in different places. So I was guided a lot by Kitty's work in that, but also at the university, you do a lot of training about the possibilities, where do you look for information? Yeah, so it does raise many questions and answers many questions. So thing 5?
Yes. Thank you, Ruth. That was great.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Nice to see you.
We're going to move into thing number 5, future of ECD.
So I mentioned my family coming to Hey Days. When they came back, my children were so excited and were thinking about, how do we make this happen in Australia? How do we make more people aware? So there is a worry here. There's a big decline in, well, not a big decline because there was never a big audience, but a decline in the numbers of young people dancing. So at our folk festivals, you get plenty of young people who go along and jump up and down to the dance music. So they'll go to an Irish concert and they will, they jump up and down and wave their arms and that sort of thing, which I think is fine. Like, I have nothing against that, but it's not carrying on a tradition. It's, we've got dancing traditions. And it's that element that worries me, that that's not being passed on. You have, competitive levels of dancing, but we don't have, dance schools that teach country dancing, for instance. It isn't apparent in our curriculum, which leads me to the next picture, because I've been developing with a friend who is at the university here in dance education. We've been working on developing a series of dance units for primary schools. So this is the first one we've produced. It's about dancing on cookship. So we teach 2 country dances in this and a sailor's hornpipe. So that's my son, Roland, who you may recognise. So he danced the sailor's hornpipe, a version for primary school children. And we've got teaching videos and so on. So we're actually marketing that. And we're working on another one at the moment, which is connected to the gold rushes in Australia. So they occurred after the gold rushes in California. So there's a lovely picture from California of hairy, what do they call them? Hairy-faced gentlemen dancing polkas together, which is, that happened here too. So that's a great one. And moving on from there, I've talked a little bit about the quality of teaching. So Bruce and Brooke were really good coming here. So we really enjoyed that input and the new ways of teaching. I'm actually the chair of the Australian Social Dance Network. So when Bruce came particularly, it was really interesting to get in touch with all the dance groups that were interested in English country dancing and contact them and say, are you interested in having Bruce come to visit? Some of them are quite small and spread out, as we said earlier, but a lot of them were interested. Well, all of them were interested, but it's so spread out. He didn't get everywhere, but he did a pretty good job. So we're hoping that those connections can be strengthened. We've been planning for Orly Orly Krasner to come and visit. So I'm really hoping that that will happen. It all got messed up with COVID, of course, but maybe next year, maybe the year after. But, you know, the invitation is there. Please come and visit us. And everything you bring, you know, even come and dance with us. If you don't want to come and teach, you can still come and dance. Just teach a couple of dances. So my dream would be to have something like Nifty in England, where the young people all get together and learn to perform, and they learn the dances. I would love that. Or the National Folk Theatre of Ireland, if you've ever seen one of their performances. I think that would just be heaven. I would love to have something like that in Australia. But on a more perhaps sensible level, to have a place like Pinewoods or Halsey Manor, you know, we really don't have a centre like that. The Bush Music Club in Sydney has a little hut, which is really cute. And they have little concerts there and a library and so on. But it's, you know, in no way comparable to Pinewoods, where you have dance halls and all these, you know, wonderful, wonderful staff. And, you know, it's just amazing. So I think it's important to just carry on dancing and teaching and talking to people about it and writing about it. So please get well in America and in England so we can travel the world and come dancing again. Thank you.
Oh, wow. What a great talk, Dr. Heather Clarke. Thank you so much for being with us. You're such a delight. It's been wonderful getting to know you better these few weeks. So thank you. Thank you. I have to ask you a couple of questions, but first, I want to let everybody know that Heather has a wonderful website and she has a newsletter. So make sure you sign up for that newsletter. It's really interesting. So make sure you do that. We're posting the link in the chat box, that important chat box. What is your favorite dance?
I don't have a favorite dance. There's just too many. But I do have a favorite note in a dance, which is in the Elephant Stairs. There's a note where it goes up an octave and you're casting off and you just float as doing it. I just love that instant where nothing else matters. And it's that whole idea of harmony and harmony within the set, harmony with your partner, and harmony with the universe, like Plato said. Yeah, that's it.
Magic. Yes. Yes. That's great. And I have to ask you, because you're one of our overseas friends, are you a tea drinker? And
I certainly am. Look, I've got my tea. I always drink tea from a pot. Got my pot. And my favorite tea is the Australian tea. It's by the T2 company, Melbourne Breakfast Tea. The best tea in the world.
Oh, I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, well, when I come visit, I'll bring some.
That would be great. We'll have a tea party at the next Hay Days.
Oh, what a good idea. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. It's a real pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
Oh, well, it's been great getting to know you. So thank you. And I want to give a shout out to my 5 Things team, Lindsay Verbal, and in the background, Reed Wilson on Zoom, Larry Hansen on Facebook, along with my helpers, Kara King and Dan Bilter. Thank you so much. Thank you, Colin Hume, who maintains an accessible index of all our web chats on his website in one place. There's now 41 web chats we have done. And then with this one, it'll be 42. Whew. And a big thank you to all the folks who've been sending in donations to our group, the Historical Tea and Dance Society. We really appreciate it. There are operational expenses, and so thank you. We are posting the After Talk link now. Make sure you go there and join us for questions. Lots of things to talk about. Next week, next Tuesday, we have coming in Alan Winston, caller, choreographer, dance organizer. He's got quite the history. It's going to be great. Alan is really fun and quite the thinker, so we're going to have a lot of fun with that. If you feel like coming in and joining us for tea time on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, please do. We love having people just pop in and say hi. So there, you don't have to stay the whole time. Just come by and say hi. Come to our Historical Tea and Dance Friends page around 4:30 for more information on Thursdays, or send us an email. And we also want to wish all our friends a happy holiday season. May you stay connected to your joy and with friends near and far, this year more than ever. So with that, I am going to post a personal link that I posted on our page today, possible places to do some holiday shopping online. Since some of us are buying gifts, I'm going to post some people that you might consider picking up gifts at, including this next one, which is we can support Heather's research by purchasing Captain Cook's Country Dances, the book and the CD. It's really fabulous. Lots of interesting reading, a great CD, and the music that's going to play us out is a wonderful version of a very popular dance here in Southern California for sure, and many places. So we will see you all in 2 minutes in the after talk, and we are playing you out with Salamanca Castanets from the CD, Captain Cook's